welcome to Roll for Geekiness, and welcome to another episode of the Deck Brewers Cauldron, the series where members of our team talk about their favorite Magic the Gathering decks and the cards and combos that make them tick. I am Jonathan, and today I will be talking about my Arcades the Strategist Commander deck. As always, let's start with a look at the card. Arcades the Strategist costs one generic, a green, a white, and a blue for a 3/5 Elder Dragon with flying and vigilance. Arcades also has two static abilities. The first says that whenever a creature with Defender enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. The second says, each creature you control with Defender assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power, and can attack as though it didn't have Defender. That second ability is really powerful because it basically breaks two rules of the game, but only for me. My creatures with the Defender keyword assign combat damage differently, and on top of that, those creatures can ignore the attack restriction that keyword usually implies. Any abilities that let you break the rules, especially just for yourself, are usually pretty good. This one's really useful because many creatures with Defender cost less mana because of the attack restriction, and also because they tend to have 0 power, dealing no damage during combat. Arcades not only lifts that attack restriction, but makes it so that these high toughness creatures can hit pretty hard. Oh, and don't forget that first ability, the one that lets me draw cards. So yeah, my deck leans very heavily into Arcades abilities. Yes, in these colors I could build a deck with a lot of interaction. Removal and protection from white and green, counter spells from blue. But instead, I've got 36 creatures with Defender, and 21 cards that are going to enhance them. This deck either goes big or it goes home. Either way, it's usually pretty fun to play. That said, there have been many games where due to the low casting cost of my creatures, Arcades' draw ability, and the density of creatures in my deck, that I put 5, 6, or more creatures on the battlefield in a turn. And remember, these are essentially 5/5s or 6/6s, so that's a lot of potential damage. I can make sure that that damage gets through by playing some more one-sided tricks of this deck, board wipes. There are a number of board wipes that care about the power of creatures. And remember, Arcades doesn't change the power of my creatures, just how they deal damage. So most of the time, the total power of my board is no larger than that of Arcades itself. So cards like Slaughter the Strong, Fell the Mighty, and Wave of Reckoning work great to clear my opponent's boards and not touch mine at all. By the same token, Meekstone is just rude in this deck. My creatures are always going to untap, and Arcades has vigilance. Alternatively, Tetsuko Umezawa, Fugitive, makes all of my creatures unblockable. Often any one of those three things, well-timed, can let me finish a game with all of my effectively very large creatures. Now, the flip side is that this deck is easy enough to shut down just by removing Arcades. I have a couple things that can grant hexproof, but I've opted to include several other cards that provide similar effects to Arcades. High Alert does everything that Arcades does without the card draw. Assault Formation does the same, though I have to pay a green for each attacking creature. Walking Bulwark also works, but I need to pay 2 each. Lastly, Huatli, the Sun's Heart, doesn't let me attack, but does do that whole assigning damage bit, so at the very least, I have a difficult board for people to attack into until I can either get Arcades back online or one of those other pieces into play. As always, link below to the full deck list on Architect. And when you look at any of my deck lists on Architect, not only will you see the full list of cards in the deck, but you will see the list of cards that I have cut from the deck, a maybe board of cards that I would consider for the deck, and a wish list of cards that I'm looking to put in the deck, along with a post at the top of what those cards will replace. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What cards or combos might I have missed? Or what are your favorite stories about our friend Arcades?